Which we're now live. So good morning, Derby. Thank you very much for joining us again, everyone. And you see we've got quite a full house today. So I'll introduce you to everybody that quickly we have on screen. So first we've got a very special guest today, which is Jane Middleton-Smith. And she is the archivist for WW Winter Limited. So a wave there to Jane. Also, we have with us people that you've met before already. So regulars now on the show. We have Joe, who is the chair of Friends of Derby Arboretum. We also have Ben, who is the secretary of the Friends of Derby Arboretum, and our very own community parks officer, Mick McNaught, who's also with us. So if it's your first time joining us on the show, well, welcome back, first of all, to everybody who has been watching these regularly. We thoroughly appreciate it and are thrilled with the audiences that we have been having, more than we could have ever imagined. So a very big thank you to all our regular watchers, and thank you and welcome to those of you who have just joined us. So what is the Derby Arboretum Festival online all about? Well, we run Lark in the Park every year in September, and it's all about the anniversary of the gift of the Derby Arboretum by Joseph Strutt to the people of Derby. Now, this year is a particularly special year because it's an 180th anniversary, so quite a big one, not quite as big as 200, so we'll perhaps have to do something even more spectacular then, but 180 is obviously a really big one, and we're in COVID, so we've had to come up with something a little bit different, and we're very glad we did, because things have been changing over time, and as of yesterday we've now got the rule of 6. So there are obviously changing ways on how we socialise, how we come together, and so on. And so we're saying, and Mick can back me up on this as the community parks officer for Derby Parks, that we're saying enjoy the park in the usual way, according to any government rules that are out there, or restrictions that we have at the moment, but you can still be part of the celebrations that we would normally put on the park when we're putting up tents and all that kind of thing. We're still keeping the sense of community here for you by running a full week's worth of celebrations here online. Tomorrow is a very special day, because tomorrow is the day where it actually was the celebrations on the park on the opening day. So that was when it was gifted, the actual day it was gifted to the people. And there was a whole week of celebrations as well. And Mick, you know a little bit more about that on the different days. So on the 15th, so today, it was sort of just invited. In 1840, it was just invited sort of dignitaries and so on, and then the 16th it was actually open to the public. Is that right?
If you go to Loudon's catalogue, there's a whole section on the ceremony, and there's the gifting ceremony with and in the afternoon then, so that was in the council chambers. Then it was on the 16th when the gifting was done and all the speeches were done in the council chambers. Then in the afternoon there was a procession of about 1,500, according to Loudon's account, that came to the Arboretum, and then on the second day there was a bigger opening to the general public at Derby. But I think there's a few different variations on the theme depending on which press publication you come across. Some mention 2 days, some mention 3 days, but according to Loudon, and what he published was an article out of a Chesterfield newspaper reporter was actually put in his catalogue, says that it was the 16th, the gifting, and an opening celebration for sort of dignitaries and families, and then the general public on the 17th. But yeah.
But clearly an enormous event for Derby, and 1,500 people. That's incredible. And we couldn't get away with in these times putting 1,500 people, or encouraging 1,500 people to the park. But we hope people are as enthusiastic about the park as they were when it first opened. And we've had a balloon theme earlier on the week, because a hot air balloon was even launched on the opening day and on subsequent decades afterwards. Tomorrow is a very special day. So that is the day we'd normally do the celebrations in the park. But as I say, we've got a live show every week. Everyone who'd normally be performing on the park have created some home videos, and they've in different styles, and we've been premiering them every day after the live show. And they've been appearing that you can watch at your leisure. We've also been interacting on social media as well, and so we had a quiz this time for we were asking. So we've done three quizzes so far, and if I can perhaps share what we had yesterday. So we put this one up yesterday, and this is a very interesting one, and I think it feels like they're probably getting harder, and certainly this one is, and unless you knew the catalogue or you looked in Mick's video, you wouldn't necessarily know. And if I didn't know, if Mick hadn't told me, I would have probably gone for walnut tree. Now you have to remember that the Derby Arboretum was designed as a exotic collection, so these are trees that are from all over the world. Now we haven't quite extended to a coconut tree, I think. I mean, Mick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's a coconut tree in the park. I have no idea whether it would survive in this climate or not. And of course, we do have walnut trees, but walnut tree isn't #1 Arboretum, isn't the #1 in Loudon's catalogue. It's actually a cucumber tree. And Mick, you enlightened me in our film that was premiered yesterday that it doesn't actually grow cucumbers, does it?
No, and actually I've got a confession. I mean, it just goes to show that you're told things and you take them in good faith. I actually went back to Loudon's catalogue, because we're looking at doing some further tree plantings in the park, and actually looked at what it says in his catalogue. And actually the cucumber tree is actually listed number 13. Actually, I've put my hand up to... No! So I will correct myself online now. But it was...
Well, I'll tell you what, we need to know what #1 is, and you'll have to come back and tell us, because if it's a walnut tree, we're going to have to write to every single one of those and say, no, you were actually right. So number 13, if they looked at your film, obviously that's what we called #1 one at the time. But the cucumber tree is a Magnolia acuminata, is that right?
That's right, yes, a beautiful specimen of magnolia. That area of the park was originally planted up in the family group of magnolias and other related species, which included the tulip tree and various other shrubs and plants that are all related to that same family. Which we have restored in part, and we're increasing the collection of magnolias in that area.
And you'll come back and tell us what is #1 Arboretum planting in one of the later shows.
Well, hopefully I'll be able to tell you a bit later on today, if you remind me. I'll get the catalogue.
Oh, fantastic! So that's another good reason for everyone to stay tuned as Mick discovers what is #1 Arboretum of planting of the trees in the park in 1840. But what is also really quite special about that is that implied from that is those trees have been there for 180 years. So those are the old ones. Obviously, for good park management, trees have been removed, trees have been added over time, and those that are that were in Loudon's catalogue have been there for 180 years, and there are quite a few of them in the park. And as a result, a few of those are now champion trees. So some of the largest specimens of that type in the country. So it is a record-breaking park in many, many different ways. Before we move on to our very special guest today, just to remind you that there is a quiz, another quiz that's been put up. And this maybe ties in with some of what Jane's going to talk to us about, because the park has been a focus for many of the celebrations, national celebrations that in the country at any one time. In Derby, the focus for those national celebrations, when people came out and they had their parties and so on, it happened in the park. It happened in Derby Arboretum. Now, of course, there's a lot more civic spaces now than there used to be back then. So the Derby Arboretum is just one of other spaces that national events take place in. So today's quiz states that, but also asks, when was Derby given city status? Was it in 1957, 1967 or 1977? So if you go to Twitter, you'll be able to find that poll and choose your answer, and of course we'll reveal the winner tomorrow. So I want to now sort of come across to Jane. Hi again, Jane. So, well, very many welcomes to our lunch show, and I'm so thrilled that you can come and join us. And you are joining us from home, not the actual archives from Winters today, but it's nonetheless you look like an archivist, if I may be so bold, with all of your records behind you. So it's a real privilege for you to be on, because WW Winter Limited, as I understand it, is the oldest retail outlet and pub and photographic studio in the UK, and I've walked past it many times not realizing that. And the building itself, I've always thought, well, that looks a little bit different, but I didn't realize quite how special it is. And obviously its uniqueness extends to the fact that many people in Derby will have had their portraits done there, but also many of their ancestors will have had their portraits done at WW Winter as well. So your archives of the utmost interest to the people of Derby, and a cross section of social history in the UK as well. So perhaps you could share with us a little bit of the history of WW Winters.
Well, there are a number of points there that you've raised, and I think a bit like the Arboretum, you know, Winters is a hidden gem. I hope you don't mind me saying that about the Arboretum, but certainly Winters or WW Winter Limited is a company we knew, because there's a date above the door of 1867. We knew it was 1867, the studio. But in fact, from the research that we've done, we can push the story of the studio a lot further back. We knew that Winter had inherited the business from predecessor, Nicholas Emmanuel Charles, who was a Frenchman. He came to Derby, we think, around 1852. And that puts him right back at the beginning of commercial photography. So Winters is a very important place for Derby from that point of view, from the photographic history point of view. Just as photography opened up, you know, the company's right in there at the very beginnings of commercial photography. And so therefore we've had a very long link with the people of Derby, and not just the people, but the places and the industries. So when we turned 150, 2 years ago, we called the exhibition People, Places and Things, and that kind of sums up, you know, Winter's involvement with Derby, the people, the places and the things in Derby. So it's an intimate connection with you, the Arboretum, but with all sorts of other places, buildings, events, and obviously individuals. So we've got people who come in who said, oh yeah, my father had his portrait taken here, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and so on and so on. And, you know, when I walked into the studio in 2014 to start the Heritage Project, I was overwhelmed by what I saw. Just as, you know, you are about the 180-year-old trees, we've got photographic plates that go back back to the beginning of photography, and many thousands of images, hundreds of thousands of images.
So we have a park full of trees, and you have boxes full of people's family trees.
Absolutely, yes, and also
so they're sort of, yeah.
Sorry, also they're places of work, and and pleasure and enjoyment and events that they participate in. But yeah, portraiture has always been very important.
And I mean, your archives presumably are boxes of real photos. Are you digitizing those? What are you doing to preserve these photographs?
Well, the company has always been very good at keeping their stock in trade, keeping their photographic plates and their negatives when they turned over to negatives. And in theory, that there would be everything, the whole body of work. But in practice, of course, as time's gone on, the capacity of the building is finite, and people have made decisions, pragmatic decisions about what can be kept and what doesn't need to be kept.
Right.
And those, in retrospect, you kind of think, oh, if only that and got rid of those. But I suppose the further back you go, the less likely people are to come in and say, oh, could we have a reprint of that? So, those are the ones that have gone. But the company's always been very mindful, I think, of its heritage. And so we have got photographs and photographic plates, rather, that go back right to the 1860s and 70s, which is just extraordinary, really.
That's just fascinating. So a real kind of historical treasure trove right here in Derby. And I'm interested to know from Ben, Mick or Joe, have you ever had photographs taken there, or family members that have had photographs from Winters at all?
No, I'm too new. No, I know I've not been here very long, so. But okay. I will be down. I will. I promise.
We are a bit of the Derby institution, and most people who've lived here for many generations have had a contact with Derby, and people who've come into Derby, because we are an established company, and because people coming in wanted to have a photograph taken off and to send back to their families, to say they'd got a job, they were okay. People would come into the shop and have their photos taken, and they've carried on doing that. They've had their children photographed and their grandchildren, and photographed special events, and so it's lovely. It's really lovely.
And it's wonderful. You have the studios are above your retail shop, aren't they? And so many photographs are still taken in those studios. So you may be photographing family members whose parents or grandparents were photographed in those same studios.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've opened the studio up on Heritage Open Days. I know you've been talking about Heritage Open Days every September. People have, and we've also done it for other events, but people come in, and we had a 91-year-old chap who came in, and he said, oh, I had my picture taken here when I was 3 or 4. And he brought it with him. And the prop that he was standing next to as his 3-year-old self is still there. So he had his 90-something-year-old self taken on the same spot. And you can go further back. We've had people come into the shop with photographs of great-grandparents, and there's a particular rosewood little table, and this lady had a picture of her great-grandmother, and she said, oh, this is my great-grandmother in the studio. And my colleague Angela was able to say it was taken on this table, and she touched the table. I know, she touched the table and cried, and it's just...
I think I'm about to cry, actually. It's a lovely story. And so certainly, I mean, Heritage Open Days, you should go along, obviously, and bring, if you do have photographs from WW Winter, bring them along with you. Yes, you can put them in the same space.
Yeah, I mean, everybody else, we're not able to do open studios this year, which is why we've done the online exhibition, and it fitted very well with the theory, which was nature in our lives. So Hannah, my colleague, has done a fantastic job of rather than doing an actual exhibition, which we've done every year to fit in with the theme, she's done an online exhibition, which has been lovely. So the Arboretum, we've had a very intimate link with you in that sense, you know, because we've been able to.
Well, you've very, very kindly brought with you some unpublished photographs of the Derby Arboretum, and we're dying to see those. But before we do, we'll come back to that. So obviously, stay tuned for these thus unaired so far photographs of the Derby Arboretum. Jo has been publishing photos from our archives and other archives that Jo Simister has access to, and she's been asking people to guess the year, and as I understand it, Jane, you don't always know the year of these photographs that you may have.
No, often we do, because every negative, every image has a unique number, and after a certain time it's kind of linked to the year, but starting off it wasn't. So, you know, we've had to try over the years to pin events to numbers, so we can try and put together a sequence, so we know if it's between certain points, it's you know, between 1882 and 1883 sort of thing. And the more fixed points we get, the more accurate we are at estimating the exact date of the plate. So that's been an ongoing volunteer research project, actually, to do that. Originally, we would have had the registers. They had an ongoing list. So every time a plate was made, it would be recorded in a book. So we'd know the number, the person that was being photographed, or the place, the person who commissioned it, and so on, and obviously the date. But sadly, a lot of those books were recycled during the Second World War as part of the paper drive. And in fact, the previous owner and managing director, as a very little boy, when I first started there, he said, "Oh, I can remember all those books in the corridor waiting to go off," and he saw them being loaded onto the lorry, and they were pulped. I know. So
history itself, just that very action.
But again, you know, it was kind of, at the time they were doing their patriotic duty, and the registers weren't being used, so or very rarely used. So anyway, it's made a lot more research for us to do, and it's great, you know, if people can identify things or know from their own particular research what something was or the exact date, that's fantastic. So that's what we're doing.
Well, we've been having wonderful fun on the show, doing a bit of detective work, trying to, you know, guess people's clothing and what's actually being displayed on the park, in order to try and guess the photos. And we've been asking people to guess the dates and send information in if they do have any ideas. So, Jo, did you want to update us on that?
Yes, because a slight glitch yesterday, so we didn't give the results of day 2. So I'd like to do that first.
So we've got the photos, and Jo has very conveniently put the dates, the years against them.
That's right. So this is these were the 3 that I posted on day 2, and these are the answers. The one at the top is Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee, with the Mayor of Derby, Sir Thomas Roe, receiving guests in the Arboretum. The balloon was William Wyndham Sadler. He was the first person to get a true bird's eye view of the Derby and district, as he accomplished the first ever manned balloon flight and flew over the town, and that was in 1823. Oh, Queen Victoria, 1897. Yeah, so earlier, that's the one I said you wouldn't guess unless you did some online research, and even then I don't think you would have found it. And then the coronation down here, I had guessed wrong. Oh, I'm just not old enough. In 1902, and it was Edward VII. The coronation was in 1902, although he acceded to the throne in 1901 on the death of Queen Victoria. So I would accept either of those answers. Okay.
And did anyone get it right?
Yes, some people guessed the coronation year. Yeah. They didn't get the balloon, and they didn't realise that it was Queen Victoria's Jubilee. But some people got quite close. They obviously looked at the dresses, which is, you know, what we were going to do. Now, the other thing that I didn't do yesterday was to share yesterday's set. So I'll just give you those now, and you can have a little thinking session while you're watching. And then I'll come back.
Yeah, Ben, Mick, and I can see if we can spot anything in there that makes any sense to us.
Our theme yesterday had been about the community gardens. So I just start off with 2 photos of people working in the gardens that we don't know dates for. So there's a couple of guys here. I think they're working on dahlias. And I don't know quite what they're doing, but Mick might be able to explain sometime. This next one is gardeners working on a corner near the fountain, which is where I think eventually the Henry Royce statue was put. Anyway, it's nice to see passers-by and the guy on the bench just watching the gardeners. And I grew up in Walsall, and we have an author, Jerome K. Jerome, and one of his sayings is, "I love work, it fascinates me. I could sit and look at it for hours." And that's kind of how I think that one looks. Right, quiz. Oh, and another one here, which I'll talk about again in a little while. This is a very, very early photo of formal gardening, and we think it's 1880s. The Arboretum didn't look anything like it does nowadays. It was very open and with a lot of formal gardens, for which you need a team of gardeners, of course. So here is a very early.
Can I interrupt there, Joe, just to kind of highlight for people that that's where you and Mick are actually broadcasting from, that orangery right now.
I'm sitting in there, and so is Mick. Yeah, and that's why there's an echo on my voice. And then the next, sorry, skip that one. So guess the year. Here's a lady hurrying from the shops with a shopping bag. Any ideas?
Those tulips are beautifully planted, aren't they?
Yes,
I mean, a lot of work's gone into that.
A lot of the photos have the tulips and the spring bulbs on. I think they must have been particularly welcome after the winter. And I think it must have drawn photographers into the park and the local reporters and so on. So that's number 1.
So it's a bit easier, isn't it, to sense the seasons, isn't it, in that one? Where Robert, the year is, would have probably her dress might help give a clue to people.
Yeah, and I did post these on Facebook. So if anybody wanted to look at them, they would find them on Facebook if they wanted to go back and look. The next one is this one. The New Zealand cricket team visited. And there's a beautiful little medallion garden laid out. What year was that then? And the next one,
cricket fans.
And then the last one is obviously another formal setup and another coronation. What year? Okay, so that's now, and I'll give you the answers at the end of the programme.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you very much. Joe, for those photos. So the theme on this session is all about memory lane. So sharing all of these photos hopefully sort of triggers some memories for other people as well. But some of these photos go way back beyond all of our lifetimes, and that just goes to show how old this park is, having been established in 1840. And Jane, you've got some photographs from your archives as well. So you've brought in 3. So these three photos. So yes, share the screen so we can have a look perhaps at the first one. And these photographs have never been shown to the public before. So these are even us at the Friends of Derby Arboretum haven't seen these photos, and they're I mean, the quality of it is beautiful, even though that's clearly quite a while ago.
Yes, and again, as Joe said, it's obviously spring. You know, this beautiful tulip display. I mean, it just looks a wonderful spring day, doesn't it? But the quality of image that you get from these glass plates is sublime. You know, it's so clear, and you can, once they've been scanned, which we're doing as part of the Heritage Project, you can actually drill into them and blow up little tiny details, which is fantastic. You know, you can see tiniest things, so you could probably go and identify the exact little underplanting of the tulip. Look, they look daisy-like, don't they? I don't know what they are, but great that you've got all these ladies with prams, these big prams, all of the benches occupied. So I would think it's the first nice day. And is that blossom on the trees behind? It looks like it might be. I don't know, but fantastic photograph.
And it's the way it is beautiful, and it's the way that the Arboretum has changed over time. It wasn't, and Mick and I were chatting about this in the film that we premiered yesterday, that Loudon's original motivation for the park was to have these kind of small specimen trees, but over time we've allowed them to grow, and so we've taken out trees, put trees back in, and the park looks very different today than it did at various stages in the past. And Jo was mentioning in her photos how, you know, at one point it was very open, and Mick was telling me in our film, only 20 years ago it was very crowded. It was full of trees, and so they were forced to grow in certain ways to deal with the competition from other trees. So it just goes to show, Mick, how important it is, park management is, when you've got all these exotic trees.
Yes, absolutely. As you just mentioned, before the restoration of the Arboretum, which was completed in 2005, the first thing they did was take out 111 trees. And if you walk around it, you wouldn't believe that number of trees could have been removed and still leave the great number that there still is here. So, yeah, and ongoing management is always a key thing. We're again looking this year.
I learned from you as well that the reason one of the is it the lime that has grown upwards as one of the largest specimens, because there are other trees around it, and so it forced it to grow upwards to the great height that it is.
Yeah, that's right. We have a number of champion trees on site, as well as a number of trees which are original plantings from 1840. But we have got one specimen. It's not a particularly old specimen of Caucasian lime, which is actually the tallest Caucasian lime in the United Kingdom. And that was purely because it was forced to grow between a couple of London plains fully established, and the only way to get light was if it grew up as quickly as it could. So it's not the oldest Caucasian lime. It's certainly not the widest in girth, but it is nonetheless, I'm led to believe, the tallest.
Well, I mean, if I can sort of interrupt our photographs here and just give a shout out to, I've had several shout outs, but a shout out again to Cedars Park, which is 20 kilometres north of London and Cheshunt. And they've been, they're big fans of yours, I think, Mick, because they wanted to know the ages of their London plane trees, and they identified you as an expert from the film. So I said I'd let you know. So I've passed that on, and you can be in touch with them. So so the lime grew up because of the London plains around it. So yes, so the feature that we have in this in this photograph is a very, even though the layout in terms of the paths are still there, the trees would have been in very different positions, and you know, other ones are there, and the ones are there that are not there now, would be as time goes on. But in terms of the quality, it really is quite spectacular. And you say it's a glass plate. What does a glass plate mean? Well,
when photography first started, there was no such thing as film. I mean, now we don't even know what, kids don't even know what film is, but photographic images were fixed onto a glass plate using a chemical medium, you like, that involved silver nitrate and so on. So the glass was coated with this photographic medium emulsion, which was done by hand by the photographer. And the photographers often, I mean, they were quite good chemists. You know, they had to understand how to do this, and they had to be practically very good to be able to coat the plate evenly. And then, you know, you've seen people in films going under a dark cloth, so they would put the plate into the back of the camera with the lens cap on the camera itself, and then they would expose the plate, light, pointing at whatever they were wanting to take the image of, for a certain amount of time. And initially it was quite a long exposure time, so maybe a minute, sometimes 2 minutes to begin with, and latterly exposure times got shorter and shorter. And then you would put your lens cap back on, and then you would take that back to your studio, or if you in the early days, if you were doing outdoor shots, you'd have a developing caravan or something, and you'd go in there and develop the image and fix it onto the plate, and then you've got a permanent image that you can reproduce time and time again onto a piece of photographic paper. So you put paper on the exposed plate, and to begin with, expose that to light as well, and then you would get your positive print from it. So these are negatives, and then what you're seeing now is the positive print.
And as a result, you're
Yes,
able, the quality is such.
Yeah.
And as a result, the quality is such that you can zoom right in to look at some incredible detail, which must help with your archivist work.
Oh, absolutely, because you can see all sorts of details. I mean, these are important photographic records, just as Jo was showing with her images. You know, photographs show you what something was like at a given point in time. So you can see the exact layout of these beds, exactly where that lamp standard was, and the benches and so on. And it's really, in terms of understanding the development of a place, I imagine, for you, these are really useful tools, just as they are for people who are looking at industrial heritage, or people who are looking at costume development, you know, or hairstyles, whatever. You can actually see the image, but then you can go into it and actually pick up really tiny details. And the other thing is, because they were taken by a professional photographer, they were called photographic artists, because they are, you know, photographers are artists. They're painting an image with their photo, so that you get something that's really well composed, that's attractive to look at. So you've got the detail, you've got the information, but it's done in a beautiful artistic way, which is really, you know, as an artifact, it's really important.
Well, we're over the moon that you're sharing them with us, and you've got a couple more as well.
I have. Right, next one. So that's another view of the park with the orangery in the background and the fountain that you were talking about.
Oh, yes.
And again, quite a lot of beds. I don't know what this, can you see? There's another statue there. Do you know what that is?
That would have been Royce.
Oh, that's Henry. Okay. So there you are.
Yes, Henry Royce. He was a founder of Rolls-Royce. So excuse my ignorance. I'm just matching the names up there. Is that right?
Yeah.
People who know more than me.
I don't know.
And that statue's not there anymore. Ben, you know where it is?
I can't remember exactly where. It's been relocated to a Rolls-Royce garden somewhere. Jo knows.
So it is safe somewhere with Rolls-Royce.
Yeah, so I think it's somewhere on the Rolls-Royce estate, but I'm not sure exactly where.
No.
We ought to ask
them. And the fountain.
Yes.
Yeah, we should. And the fountain looks similar to what it is at the moment. I can't quite make it out. Is it the smaller one, or is it the larger?
It's the smaller one before it was renovated. So that featured in one of the photos I showed earlier on. Yeah, a couple of days ago. Yes, it was when it was a bit truncated.
And do we know the date of this one, Jane?
I haven't got a note of the negative number actually, but I'm guessing from the dresses, it's probably 50s, could be 40s, but I would think late 40s, early 50s, something like that.
And kind of piercing through time here as well. Again, it's Mick and Joe are actually broadcasting from that orangery, but if you say that's the 50s, 70 years later. So using this amazing technology called Zoom and YouTube and so on. Yeah, fantastic. And then you have one more, I think.
I do. So this is much older. And this particular plate, you can see some damage on the side. And I think that's because they were put into paper envelopes or like wax paper envelopes. And depending on where they are, originally they would have been in very perfect storage conditions. But as things have got moved around the building because it's got more stuff in it, things were put in slightly less than perfect conditions. So this was probably down in the cellar or in one of the back rooms and got slightly damp, so that the paper is stuck to the image and then pulled the emulsion off. So when you take the print,
well, they look fabulously dressed, and Joe and I sort of slightly disagree over this. Joe thinks, oh, thank goodness we don't have to dress like that now. And I think, oh, why can't we dress up in big flowery things and wander around the park wafting with these big dresses? But I do take Joe's point that could be quite inconvenient after a while, and us women wear trousers now for a reason. It is a lot more comfortable. But they're wearing wonderful hats and everything, aren't they? So there's something going on there, isn't there?
Well, I thought Joe might know, actually. Again, things that with this collection, you know, we want people to kind of help us to identify these events and places and so on. So this is clearly in the park. We know it's got Arboretum on it, but it doesn't say what event it is. But it obviously is an event because we've got this kind of stand with flag poles in it and these lovely garlands here. So whether it's we thought it was probably a royal visit, but I don't know how many royal visits you had to the park. Do you know, Joe?
I don't know.
Well,
I'm looking at this.
Photo.
Yeah, I'm looking at it and thinking that it's very similar to that to the Queen's Diamond Jubilee.
I wondered that too.
Some of the dresses look the same.
Yes. Well, hopefully we can do a bit of joint research on that.
Yeah.
Look, but you know, Edward, the new king who came after Victoria, Edward VII, he visited Derby, and then there are other members of the royal family sometimes who came. So his wife, Princess Alexandra, came, and the studio we named the Alexandra rooms after her because when her portrait, not Winter actually, his successor, but you know, I would have put this sort of at the turn of the century, I think.
Yes,
late 1890s.
Yeah, I think you're right. But there were quite a few royal visits to Derby for various reasons, including for the first hospitals and so on.
Yes.
But we must talk. We must talk about this.
We must talk, yes.
Well, I know certainly at Derby Parks and Arboretum itself, we do have many photographs, which I've seen only very recently for the first time through this project. And a feature of these photographs is the number of different events, national events that have been celebrated in the Derby Arboretum, and that has been the choice in Derby of where to do these celebrations. So the Derby Arboretum, I think, is a little bit of a forgotten, not just a hidden gem that's, you know, accessible now and usable now and so on, but it's a bit of a, I think, a forgotten timeline or snapshot of history, because all of these events were celebrated in the Derby Arboretum. So I think, yes, you and Joe getting together to perhaps match up some of these photographs and have a better chance of dating some of these photographs could really turn into a real, you know, an even greater understanding of the history of Derby and what happened. And as we've been learning, Derby really has been a very important city for many reasons.
Absolutely.
But thank you very much for sharing those with us. They're absolutely fascinating, and you've got more, I understand, as well. So hopefully there'll be future collaborations which will help us understand and appreciate these photographs that we each have in our archives. But I noticed in all of the photographs that there are these sort of undulating mounds, and you see that right the way through from 1840 right through to the current day. The landscaping are these kind of high mounds with trees on top of them, and it's always there in all the photos. They seem to be in slightly different places. I don't know if that's possible or not, but they have always been there. But there was a motivation behind that, and Mick, you were telling me all about that in the film, but there is a reason behind that, isn't there, Mick?
Yes, yeah. I'm just going to share you a plan from 1840, if I can get it to come up.
Oh, so
I'm
guessing you've got Loudon's work with you.
This is Loudon's catalogue from 1840, and you can see on this plan of the original Arboretum, all of those mounds actually marked around in the plan, all contained within the paths of the Arboretum there. Yeah, when Loudon took on the site, he describes it as being fairly flat. It's a small 11-acre site. It's flat, of no particular interest. And he's really got a challenge as a landscape designer to try and make this an interesting space, but also because of its small size, his biggest challenge was not to let the visitor know how small it was. And it's fair to say that Strutt was also aware of this. Strutt and Loudon, there was a major collaboration. Loudon was the designer, but Strutt did have a lot of input. But basically, there's two uses for the mounds. One is to obscure views across the park, so that if you're walking on one path, you can't see people walking on another path, and you can't see multiple boundaries at any one time. So the size of the small size of the Arboretum becomes lost within that. So that was one of the major uses of the mounds, in that to give a sense of seclusion, and it helps to make the Arboretum look bigger because you can't see straight across it and see how actually small it is. But also, Loudon was passionate about the way that, I'll come out of that screen share for the moment, passionate about the way trees were displayed. And I did read out a piece of Loudon's writings on the subject, where he states he thought the common then, and still common now, means of planting trees was monstrous. What quite often you get is a tree planted, and he describes it as being seen only trunk and crown, and without actually getting to see the buttressing of the roots, the third of the tree that's into the ground, and there's no suggestion of what's going on there. So one of the major reasons from Loudon's perspective was the correct display of trees. So he was planting the trees on the tops of the mounds so they'd grow, showing the buttressing of the roots more, so that the viewer would get a greater impression of the fullness of the tree, including its root structure where it joined the ground. So yeah, two great reasons why we've got these lovely serpentine mounds.
And it's another reason why the park is so unique, so different and so special. And when you walk around it, you feel this isn't like any other park. And I think if you're not aware of the purposefulness of the mounds, you probably think, well, like I did, is why does this feel so different? Then when you understand about the mounds, you go, oh yes, I see. And one of the other things from a user's point of view with the park is it does provide plenty of places to shelter privately, so you can sit under a tree and you can be in a dip, but you can see some undulations, and it gives some incredible interest to the landscape in such a small area. And I'm fascinated to know if there are actually any other parks in the UK that are actually like that. So if you do know, please write on social media or comment below this YouTube video and let us know.
Can I just jump in there, because that's absolutely fascinating. I mean, really fascinating. And it just, when you said about the collaboration between Strutt and Loudon, it just makes me think in terms of heritage. You know, we're at the end of the World Heritage Site corridor and there's a reason for us being a World Heritage Site, you know, because there are these fantastic, innovative, creative people like Joseph Strutt, you know, who just made wonderful things happen, and they had fantastically open minds and were interested in so many things. And it just makes me more and more appreciative of of Derby and where we live. You know,
Well,
the
you'll love what's
railway. It's just fantastic.
Well, that's right, and you'll in that case you'll love what's coming next, because we have in the park something else very unusual, and you wouldn't expect to see it at all in Derby. It's a wild boar. We've got wild boar in Derby. Why is that, Ben?
Oh, I can tell you in so many words, but you'll have to watch my film later to know more. Well, yes, the Florentine boar. My film does trace its origins. It was actually originally an earthenware type statue in Joseph Strutt's garden, and it was based on a statue originally in Florence, funnily enough. In the Uffizi Gallery still is the original stone statue of the Florentine boar. And my film contains the photograph that we took when we went to the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. Took a photograph of it. And then there's a couple more replicas, but out in the market square in Florence is another bronze, well, it's a fountain actually, but it's still the same as you can see in the picture behind me, a Florentine boar. And again, my film shows a picture of the boar being stroked. The snout gets stroked and ends up being very shiny because people are sort of think it's good luck to touch its snout. But anyway, coming back to why is it in our park, when Joseph Strutt eventually handed the keys, if you like, to the public, and Loudon had designed the layout, they placed they moved it to a place in the new design. So it was originally in Strutt's garden, but then it's now been in the park. But it was still an earthenware, like clay type model, and was susceptible to damage. And over time, it did actually suffer. And again, the film traces what happened, and until eventually, and because of the heritage money, etc., we have a new bronze statue that was donated at cost by someone, I can't remember his name now, but he placed that not so long ago in the park, and there's also a film available also on YouTube, but not on our channel, but there's a link to it, which shows the replacing of it. And underneath is a time capsule that some local children put together. So underneath that statue that you can see behind me, there is this time capsule. So yeah, I watched the film. I think it traces the whole thing back, in fact, to the original image of a boar in Greek mythology, and various friezes that you find around Greece, Rome, will contain a fighting scene of people chasing the boar. And so that image has been there since Greek time, Greek mythology time.
Well, I thoroughly recommend that you watch this premiere of Ben's, which is being aired at 11:15 on YouTube. And I think Ben, with the Florentine boar just there, I think Ben has possibly got a career as a documentary filmmaker, because the first video that he put up has got a tremendous amount of views and interactions, and all of us in the community have been making films for the YouTube channel, all sort of vying for views, and Ben's way ahead of the pack with his documentary film that he put up first. And it is on the Derby Arboretum and its friends, which was a beautiful film, not least down to Ben's wonderful narrating voice. So I'm expecting equally great things about the Florentine boar, and which is premiering today.
And you can see me in the film as well. I'm in it. Yes, I am.
So we call the Florentine boar just Florentine or Florence, or what's his full name? The Florentine boar. It's a full respect due to the boar, I think. Okay, so we're close to the end of the show, but we just have a few more pictures before we finish. Joe has some more conundrums for us. What do you have for us today?
Yeah, I'm very sorry, I forgot to show you this one. This was number 4 from today. which is of the fountain, but I'm going to give you the results anyway from that set, and then I'm going to give you the next set, which you can take overnight to think about. So these were the four: the little girl on the path to the fountain, the cricketers, the lady with the bag, and the crown. Okay, 1962 for the lady with the shopping bag, 1949 for the cricket team, 1904, which is, I think, probably much earlier than anyone would think, for the little girl on the path, and 1937, George VI and Elizabeth for the coronation. Okay, and then we'll just go to the other set from today. Starting here.
A new set of pictures for us to freshly guess.
And a challenge, because we have to do a bit of detective work. We don't know the answer to some of this. Now, yesterday we talked about the bowling green, which is in the rear right here. And there's an urn, which people will recognise if they know the Arboretum, and there's a statue. Okay, one of the ladies, I'll show you the ladies of the park. So this is how she looked from the front. And there were two other ladies in the park. And we would love to know where these are now. Mick says that they were taken down during the war for protection and spirited away somewhere, but we would love to know where they were spirited to. Okay, so that's
a Derby challenge.
Yes. And something else I thought you would like to know that used to be on the park was a Crimean War cannon, which was given in the 1850s, and it was melted down for World War II. So this is another loss, similar to the loss of the catalogues. That was part of the war effort. Again, we don't really know the date of the little boy, but those are the plans for the gun carriage to hold it. Okay, now then, guess the year number one. Near to where the community garden is now, there used to be an aviary, and that's a little painting of the aviary in what year? Number two, you can probably guess the decade from the other conversations we've had today of what is going on here, when it was roughly, and when it was going on. Sorry.
And these will all be on Facebook.
Yeah, they will. I've touched the wrong button.
Happens to the best of us.
It happens to the best of us, yes. I let my mouse drift up the screen. This is the next one. Here we have the Florentine door. You may be able to, after you've seen Ben's film, you may be able to guess better what the date of this is, just by looking at what the boar is made from. And the dresses, of course. We're always back to the dresses, aren't we? And those are the three for today.
Okay, thank you very much, Jo, and those will be posted on Facebook.
Yeah.
So, thank you very, very much, Jane, for joining us and sharing with us your very precious photos. So we are looking forward to collaborating with you a lot more in the future. So absolutely fascinating, very grateful for the amount of work that you're putting in preserving the history of so many important things in Derby. And after today's show, you have two premieres. You've got a premiere. We've got a premiere at 11:15, and I can see your hand up, Mick. I'll be straight over to you. I think I know what you're going to say. So 11:15, we've got Ben's Wild Boar. So the Florentine Boar. He may be upset that I call the Florentine Boar wild, but you can he's popped up to tell me off. There we go. And then 11:45 we have this is about Memory Lane. So we do have a local man singer songwriter who unaccompanied is singing some songs for us, some local songs and about Derby. So that's very evocative, and I do thoroughly recommend that you watch those. And then tomorrow is a very, very special day, because that's the 16th, and that's when it was actually donated 180 years ago to the public. That was the celebrations day, and we have as a special guest with us tomorrow historian, a specialist in the history of the Derby Arboretum and parks and arboreal matters in the UK, and that's Paul Elliott, a historian from professor from the University of Derby. We have Sarah Webster with us, who's also a community parks officer, and she's going to chat to us about the Green Flag Awards and how the park is also managed. It'll be quite interesting to see if we get different accounts between her and what Mick has said, so we can watch out for that. And she has also found that a very rare video that we're actually only allowed to air for a couple of weeks, and it's a rare video of the Arboretum from the 60s. When we saw this as friends over Zoom, we were all spellbound by it. So I do recommend you tune in for that premiere, and some lovely entertainment tomorrow as well. So before we finish and before we say our final thank yous, Mick, what have you got for us?
Right, yet another error. I do apologise. So the original listings on the Arboretum, according to Loudon's catalogue, from 1 through to 13, were all varieties of clematis. As I mentioned before, there wasn't just trees and shrubs, there was other flowering plants planted. So up to 13, you have varieties of clematis, and then we have peonies. So I'm going to correct myself completely here. So I've got it in front of me. So then we have peonies from 14 through to 16, and then the magnolias start from 16, with actually the Magnolia acuminata being number 17 on the list. And that is from
you were right. You were right to an extent. It's the first tree listed. Yeah, so it's number one as trees go. Okay, so I think round circle, we can forgive you at the end for that. Thank you very, very much, Mick, and thank you everyone for joining. Thank you everybody for watching. As friends and friends of the Derby Arboretum, we're having a thoroughly great time presenting this show to you. So Florentine Bohr is popping up to say goodbye as well. Do join us tomorrow, and a very special day, and we'll see you then. So remember, social media, #DerbyArbo 2020.